Welcome, everybody, to the Abundant Live podcast. This is episode number 42. I'm here with my good friend and faithful servant in the faith, Saso Mendez.
What's up, Ben? We have a special guest today.
We have an awesome special guest with us. We have our other brother in the faith, Mike Baldwin. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hey, I'm happy to be here, guys, and talk with you.
Awesome.
So Mike is Saso's brother-in-law. And Mike also
Look alike, you know.
yeah, real similar.
Yeah, for sure.
They call me white chocolate.
Yeah, he's striking resemblance.
So we're excited to have Mike on the show. But before we get to our content, man, we got a little taco talk to deal with.
We do. I did have tacos on Saturday at the wedding.
So was it a taco truck? What was it?
It was people that they hired, you know what I mean, to do the tacos, and a little skimpy on the. Somebody asked for one of each, and I just said I want pork and steak, which I meant like two of each. He gave me two of them. He said maybe you're too big already.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Sheesh.
they ran out of food. You know what I mean?
Oh, they ran out.
They did.
So they didn't have enough.
Yeah, I went to the gym afterwards. I called Rebecca, hey, do you want something? And she's like, no. I'm like, dang it. So I just came home.
So it wasn't like Nick's wedding where it was like they were giving brisket
Oh,
away.
no.
Okay. All right.
Hey,
Somebody failed to plan on that one.
you could count 10 pieces of meat. That's how the small was. You know what I mean? Ground beef, chicken, carne asada, pastor, and chicken.
That's cool. So I had tacos too this past weekend, and found a little taco hack. So we went down to the carne asada, the one that I think you were there not too long ago, and they got this little pack of meat. It's asada for 2 pounds, and you get the meat, you get a little bit of rice and beans, all for $20. And we just bought ourselves, some little tortillas. And man, we came home and made our own taco. We ate dinner and we had leftover. I mean, it was good for $20, man. I mean, you can't beat that.
Before, I'm not gonna say who was president in 2020. That used to be 3 pounds for $19.99.
And that's true. Biden inflation happened, but
I don't want to say that, but yeah,
that
bad,
hurts.
sorry. I'll have to edit that out.
Yeah,
Maybe I won't.
no, just leave it in there. Let it roll.
But I heard Mike had poppies. What'd you think, Mike?
It was good. I love Italian food and been to a place that I hadn't been to before, and the spicy, the pasta and the spicy meatballs is good.
But was the meatball spicy?
No,
Oh, I never had it before. Was
But
it good?
So
it had a little garlic and stuff in it, and it was sizable, and the price was right, so I liked it.
So what exactly did you order?
Spaghetti and meatballs.
Oh wow.
And then
Okay.
had a side of garlic bread, but I do not take leftovers home typically for most restaurants, and I took leftovers home.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was
So it was a healthy serving.
sizable, so you felt like you got your money's worth.
Wow.
Plenteous.
Wow.
And then you had a chicken wing too, right?
Ah,
Did you just one or two?
they're the best.
Did you have one or two wings?
I haven't had wings since I've been here in Arizona because it costs so much
Yeah, expensive.
lately, and this had its unique breading or how they dip it or fry it, and it was good.
Before the Biden inflation, it used to be 69 cents a wing during happy hour.
Yeah.
Then it went up to 89 cents, and then it went to $1. And so that guy, I don't know if you remember the guy that served us. He doesn't remember who I am. He's like,
Every time you go, yeah, right.
He gave me the spill, and this Sunday, he's like, have you guys been here before? I'm like, yeah, I've been here. He's how many times? I'm like, I don't know, at least 8. He's like, really? When? Like, you served us last Saturday. He has the memory of somebody else we know that has cognitive issues. You know what I mean?
Cognac issues, as he would say.
But I was disappointed. I'm like, when we used to go there before, they'd bring me my tea, my pitcher, you know what I mean? Salt and, some, what do you call that? Not ranch, but the blue cheese.
Blue cheese. Oh, they already knew.
This guy is just...
He was friendly, but
too friendly.
Yeah,
he
was-
kept touching you.
he
Like
was-
Jeff Gracious.
He was lost, and it's like,
a little touchy.
whatever. But if I had been there like Saso so many times and he didn't recognize me, and it's not like the place was packed, so
He said that like 5 times, too. Like, it was funny the first time, but...
Yeah. I don't think the owner has, does she recognize you now?
She or he?
She.
She was not there.
Oh,
he
wasn't
was there.
Okay.
I said bye to him. It's like, hey,
Because I've seen her a couple of different times, and she's done the same thing. She'll come up, hey, have you guys been here before? This is, I'm like, yeah, we've already heard the spiel. Like,
Rebecca said this is a scary face already. So, like, if you see it, you recognize it right away. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, who is this guy? I mean,
yeah. So part of their customer service, they need to start some facial recognition program or something.
Yeah, pretty bad. This guy, he goes like the breading on this, and we have the 20-inch pizza. I could tell him what he's gonna say before he says it to me. I almost want to tell him, 20-inch pizza.
You've already memorized his script.
I want to just tell him, you guys sell a 20-inch pizza, and then let him go. You know what I mean? Because he's just.
Matter of fact, we do.
Oh wow, yeah, the pizza's good. I think the pizza is better now at Poppy's than it was at Graziano's.
I believe so.
Sorry, Keith.
Yeah.
Hey,
My bad.
truth.
But
Yeah.
Keith gave me his number. Know what I mean?
Yeah. Wonder
This guy doesn't even know what my name is. He called me Rosendo. Like, hey, Rosendo. This guy doesn't.
He don't even know your
He
name.
don't even. Yeah, no clue, bro.
Yeah. Keith was cool.
I don't know if there's
in a weird way.
drug issue there. I don't know what's going on. Something's wrong with the.
But the food is good. I mean, they don't have the bomber anymore, which is unfortunate.
Very disappointing.
But the wings, I think, are.
They had a
are
good
pretty
Philly cheesesteak. Really good.
Yeah, I like good Philly cheesesteak. But maybe with this guy, he's so friendly and stuff like that, and he can't remember things, it might be good for the owner. Because the guy will ask for his check, and he'll say, hey, I've already given it to you.
Yeah. Maybe that's why he's there.
Yeah.
But he did give us a side of fries, which was odd, right? Because
On
we
the
had
house?
pizza and wings and spaghetti, and he gave us a side of fries.
Like on the house?
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't think I paid for it.
Okay.
Maybe he slipped it
Okay.
in there, but I didn't see
Is it the same fries as before? Because they were
Yeah,
pretty good.
pretty
Like
good.
they were crinkle
What'd
fries,
you
right?
think, Mike? They had a little, like a topping on it or
A little
something?
seasoning, they were good.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Solid.
Fries are a big deal. If you can't get the fries right, like you get a solid fries, man. And if they don't make the fries like
They're not
crispy,
crispy. Yeah, it's disappointing.
It is. I mean, fries have a shelf life, right? I mean, you get them and you got to eat them. I mean, they get soggy almost within 10, 20 minutes. They got to be crispy.
There are certain things that are hard to mess up. Fries, a good burger.
Yeah.
If a place is messing up a burger, then
Don't go back.
You might as well ban it because that's hard to do.
Burger King.
Yeah. For sure. Oh, ooh. I did the Grand Canyon. So I hiked the Grand Canyon. We did a good 3-4 hour hike in there. And the only restaurant was Burger King, and I did not eat there. She's like, put your mask on. I'm like, I'm out. And I was like super hungry.
And it wasn't probably mostly because of the mask.
That's true. And then I went to the North Rim, and all they had was elk chili. So I'm like, I should have ate at Burger King, but that's how much I don't care for. I used to love the Whopper, but when you start to look like a Whopper, it's not so enticing anymore. You know what I mean?
Hey, round is a shape.
Yeah, it is very.
It's a shape. It's a good shape.
So can be. So we had have you ever had barbacoa tacos?
Yes.
I was not impressed. Not impressed.
Okay.
Disappointed.
So it's just pretty much it's meat made like in a crock pot. I mean, it's
but compared to like carne asada or to pastor, it's not the same.
it's a different cut of meat. I think that's why
It's spicy, right?
It can be. It can be spicy. It's just more. It's not as tender. It's not tender like asada. Definitely not tender like pastor. It's a little more chewy, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what.
machaca almost.
Yeah, I don't know what cut of meat it is.
Cheap.
Yeah, man. Because it was at the end, it wasn't Jesus with the wine when we went to the wedding. It was a cheaper meat at the end. Right. It wasn't the best for last.
That's why if you do cabeza, like that's super super tender. I don't know if you've ever tried it. They got them in over at
don't think so.
Califia. It's super tender, bro. I think you'd like it.
Do you like street tacos, Mike?
I do, but I'm not too adventurous. So,
What do you typically have? Chicken?
no, carne asada.
Okay. That's my favorite.
Yes, some people love, pastor, and
Yeah, that's my favorite.
I don't
Probably
love it
me.
as much, but I might have had a bad dose or two the first. Depends on where you go, I suppose.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to get that one right. I mean, it's got to be on they call it the trompo, which is it's a circulating.
Not the big lips.
Yeah.
Not that trompo.
And then they put pineapple on top, and you got to get the marinade just right. I mean, but yeah, you can mess up pastor pretty
Did
easy.
Braden take you to that one out in Pensacola? That little taco truck?
No, we talked about it,
Okay.
but we didn't go there.
I took them there. It's been a long
How was
time.
that? Was that pretty good?
It's good, but it's just so expensive. I mean, you get a little taco and it's like $4, and you have like all your, nephews and whatever, and niece, and it's like $900. Like what?
I remember when you used to be able to get tacos $1.50, $2. That's pre-COVID, obviously, and now I mean you're looking at $3-4 a taco. That's insane.
But a street taco is small, so you think the price would be a little smaller, but not so much.
Not.
I mean, it's like what 4 bites, and boom. It's a street
I've seen
taco.
Charles do it in 2. You know,
Yeah, that doesn't surprise
he
me.
just went bam. I had 2 tacos. He had 5, and he was done. And I was like, wow.
He got 5. How did he score 5?
I don't know. He had maybe the cornrows that he put in the braids. I don't know. Well, the bad thing was Bender was making fun of him because he had the braids in. I don't know if Charles looks different with the braids, but Bender's hair is long. He looks like a Lego head. You know, you put that little plastic Lego head. That's what Bender looked like. I said, you had a Lego head, bro. So
he grew his hair out.
and then Todd, he's like, hey, let's go find somebody in line because that line's way too long. And I'm like, bro, that's not how I roll. I just go to the back. You know, that's unethical. But here I was, like, I got in the middle of the line with somebody, like, I can't feed him the last one time. They're like, hey, how's it going? So we started talking and
like, hey, what's up?
we cut in, you know? So there you go.
Wow.
I was trying to call Charles up, but he wasn't checking his phone. He was being a good friend to Bender.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was a good wedding. Great wedding with Gabe. And you met Gabe before, right? He was at Nate's party.
Yeah.
And a good guy. And everybody that I talked to there, just a lot of good things. He's been in that church for 14 years or so. So a lot of good things I said about him, just a good testimony he had, and just really happy for him and his new bride. So super cool.
That's
and
awesome.
They had tacos and chips and salsa.
I can't think of a better wedding than to have taco or brisket. You know, that was pretty good. Texas brisket, but
You went to Rebecca's birthday when we had tacos.
Yes.
Rebecca? Yeah, that was good, right?
That was good.
I thought it was good.
or was that? Where did you guys cater that
From
from?
my house.
And did they run out of food?
Nope.
No. So you had a plan.
My cousin had 16 tacos too,
Oh my word.
Where did you get the
and like
asada?
6 jalapeno poppers.
You guys cooked it, or you guys brought it?
No,
in?
we got a dude come in and he cooked it all up,
Wow.
and they had horchata and chips.
He knew a guy.
Yeah, I knew a guy.
Well-
It was like $500 for 50 people.
Okay.
It was their 40th birthday party. So
We need to do this for FTL soon.
I'm thinking about doing it at my house. Yeah.
That'd be good.
Well, you know who is it's Dayanara, I think is her name. I've really never talked to her. She's like, my family has a food truck. And I said, well, give me the card. She goes, yeah, we do tacos, whatever you want to do. I said, I'll hire you.
Pretty good,
I'll have you
actually.
come out to FTL and we'll pay you.
They do different foods. They do not just tacos, but they got burgers too.
She said, we'll do whatever you want.
And
was like,
it was
wow.
outstanding. It was good.
But I think they specialize in tacos maybe.
Yeah, they got a full menu.
But they did burgers. But she said, well, if you cater, you can get whatever you want. You pick the meat and, the price accordingly. And because we could put in the FTL budget, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Pastor French's eyes might get a little big, but hey, let's make it happen.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Christmas.
For 100.
Thanksgiving's coming up. I don't know.
Turkey tacos.
You got to break some bread.
Yes,
So
sir.
you might have to come back, Mike, for that.
Let's see if we can schedule something out here.
Bring your stretchy pants.
Yes, sir.
Get the Colonel out for that day.
All right, guys. Well, let's jump into some content here. I'm getting hungry. Haven't eaten dinner yet.
Sorry, man.
So, really quick, just want to mention we're still doing our little camera. What would you call it? Fundraiser. And we've had some donations. We're getting
$100.
Yeah, we're getting some donations in there, which is really cool. So very thankful for that. Thank you for your prayers. We do ask if the Lord puts it in your heart, and we'd love to have a donation. But most of all, we just covet your prayers. And the purpose for the camera is just right now we're using an iPhone. In the last episode, we used my iPhone. And for whatever reason, the video cut off at the 30-ish minute mark. And so we're using Saso's phone today.
Had enough of our faces. It's like,
Yeah, it was like, no. And so we're using Saso's phone today. And hopefully that works out well. But we'd like just to have a dedicated camera, one that's actually supposed to be for video, specific to video. And so if you visit abundantlife.fm, you can look on the upper right-hand corner. There's a donate button. Just click the donate button, and you'll have an option there to donate. So, again, thank you for your prayers, and thank you those of you who have donated. And we have a really special episode for you guys today. We are titling this episode Trials in the Workplace. And thank you, Mike, for coming in for this. I know you didn't fly in just for this, but it was cool to have you come in and do this episode with us. So, Saso, would you kick us off with our key verse today?
all right, Colossians 3:23 and 24. And whatsoever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men, knowing that of the Lord ye shall receive the reward of the inheritance, for ye serve the Lord Christ.
Amen.
So, just to kind of kick things off, Mike, I know our listeners obviously don't know your story. And you've got a pretty deep story, honestly. I mean, we could go all the way back to your childhood, but we're going to kind of start off with your career. So you were a police officer.
Yes.
And so what made you want to be a police officer? Well, when did you become a police officer, and then what made you want to be a police officer?
Well, I didn't want to be a police officer. I wanted to be a high school teacher and a basketball coach.
Okay.
But one of the kids that I had coached, he had graduated, and he called me up and said, "Hey, Coach, I'm testing for Phoenix PD." And I'm like, "That's great. When are you doing that?" "Oh, this Saturday." And then he said, "You should test with me." He goes, "You'd be a great cop." And I'm like, "I don't think so. I don't think my wife would approve of that, and I don't think you get paid enough to get shot at." Anyway, my wife, Tracy, she came home, and I said, "Hey, Ricky called and said he's going to test for Phoenix PD, and he thinks I should test too." And she's like, "You should. You'd be a great cop." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" And so that was the start of something. I tested that week with Ricky. We passed the written, and then we went right outside and did the physical. I remember it being the middle of August, 2:00 in the afternoon in Arizona here. Had to do the push-ups, sit-ups, mile and a half, and just smoked it because we were in good basketball shape. And the rest is history. I got hired by the Chandler Police Department and started to go through the academy with them. Got hired in late 2000. And then the career almost did not happen because the academy started January 4th, and I scouted out the academy a couple days prior on a Friday, so I knew where to be on Monday morning, and I knew what time I needed to be there. I saw the gate where I was supposed to go into, got there about an hour early, just
to be sure.
Well, according to this verse right here, I wanted to do things heartily as to the Lord. I wanted to be on time and show them that I'm motivated, and it's a life change, a career change, and nobody was behind me in line. The gate was locked. It was dark outside still. It was cold, and it's getting closer to the academy starting, and no one's behind me. And I'm like, oh, I must have got the time wrong. And then it passed the time where I was supposed to be there, and now I'm starting to panic. And I'm like, I wonder if there's another entrance to this academy. And so I started driving through the neighborhood. It was down by South Mountain, and lo and behold, I found another entrance to the academy. The gate was open. Parking lot was full.
Oh.
And this is day one. I don't know where to go on this academy grounds, and I'm like, my career is over.
Your heart sunk.
Oh, it was the worst feeling ever.
Yeah.
And I think that was God's way of going, okay, I'm going to break you right now. And so I could have been kicked out, I suppose, before it even started. So I found my way to my class, and the sergeant was in the middle of his day one speech to the academy about how your life's going to change. You're going to have to be on time to things. And I see a seat at the front of the academy class because they sat alphabetical order, and my name's Baldwin, and it's empty. I don't know what to do, so I just stand at the back of the classroom at attention, and I got talked to after the sergeant was done, and they asked why I was late. I explained that I was there early, and so I had to write a 1,000-word memo that night on the importance of being on time.
Even though you were on time.
I wasn't at the right place, though.
You just weren't at the right place. Right place, right time.
Usually I'm at the right place at the late time. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
So that's how it started.
Wow. So interesting. You never. So you didn't. So you were a basketball coach prior to that. Then you were a teacher and a basketball coach. Okay.
Yes.
And then
Now, were you at Paulo at that time, or
No, Cortez.
Cortez High School?
so you were already a Christian when you became a police officer.
Yes, I got saved at an early age. I grew up in a Christian home, and I knew I was a believer. I believed Jesus, died for my sins. I confessed my sins, asked him to come into my heart and save me. I went to a Christian college. I was in church at the time of this, going into my police career, and I had some life experience. I'd taught in a Christian school. I coached in a public school. I'd worked in a public setting prior to getting into law enforcement, but I was a believer.
Wow. And I think law enforcement is probably one of the most difficult secular jobs that you could do that would test your faith. So how did you struggle? I mean, with your faith, in your newfound job?
I did not. I didn't struggle in my faith, and perhaps had I gone in at 21 years old, it might have been a different story. But I had a little life experience. I had been married for a number of years. I had seen God work in my life, and so my faith was solid. It was grounded, and I knew God was with me, and so I did not struggle, and I'm thankful for that.
So coming into, I mean, going from a basketball coach to a police officer, I mean, it's a leap. Yeah, so it's not even closely related. Were you prepared? I mean, were you prepared for police? I mean, I know you were in shape. I mean, that got you there. That got you kind of in the door there. But were you prepared? And is there anything that you were not prepared for?
So I'm a competitor, and so as a police officer, most police officers are A-type personalities. So I competed at the academy. When we did anything physical, I competed. In the classroom, I competed. I graduated toward the top of my class, and I was a class speaker at graduation. But when I hit the street, they prepare you at the academy, but then on the street, you actually get the real lesson. And it's life or death. But I knew God was with me. I struggled, I guess, the first few weeks, just like anybody would, just learning your way around, learning the codes, putting the handcuffs on somebody the first time, getting cussed at, seeing drugs for the first time in my life. I was blessed to grow up in the home that I did, that I didn't see drugs. I didn't see the devastation of methamphetamine, heroin, crack cocaine at the time did to people's lives. But I knew what side of the law I was on. I knew what side of the law they were on. I was prepared for that. What I was not prepared for, and what the academy didn't prepare me for, was the politics in the police department and some of the struggles that I would face from people that wore the same uniform I wore.
Yeah, politics are difficult. I mean, it's a dirty dance. I mean, being a Christian, it's pretty black and white, right and wrong. It's kind of probably the same with what you have to do out on the streets. But when you get to politics, and it gets kind of icky.
Did you feel opposition because you were a Christian, or just because of the lack of work ethic with your other fellow officers? Or
I think a little bit of both. So in any secular job, any job, there's going to be people that do the minimal amount, and then there's going to be some go-getters. I happen to be a go-getter. I was always a competitor, like I said. I didn't think of it much at the time, but thinking it through now in my career, I think some of the struggles I faced is because I wasn't in the club, meaning I didn't go to the parties on the weekend. I didn't drink with some of the guys. I didn't talk like them. And so, yeah, just by that nature, they know that there's a difference. And, I didn't work for them. I worked for God, and I wanted to do the best that I could. And so sometimes I think people felt like, hey, you're trying to beat us or
show me up or something.
Yeah, and it was never that way.
So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue the conversation. Got a few more questions for you, so we'll be right back.
Are you looking to apply God's truth in a practical way to your everyday life? Stay in the Fight is a weekday devotional written by Saso Mendez. This short 3-minute read looks at a verse of Scripture and applies it to life in a very real and transparent way. Saso's blog-style writing is humorous, relatable, and a great way to align your thoughts with God's Word. Visit stayinthefight.online and subscribe to get notified by email when it releases each weekday. Stay in the Fight is a great way to keep God in your focus, and it's easy to share with others. That's stayinthefight.online.
And we're back. So, yeah, I can't imagine what it's like dealing with the politics. You're having to do the dance. You got coworkers, bosses that are, playing the game, I guess, so to speak. How did you deal with difficult bosses? I know I remember we had some testimonial time at our church recently, or this was maybe, I don't know, maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. I can't even remember now. But and I remember you gave a story about bitterness. And can you kind of elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, so it's embarrassing to talk about, but you want to talk about the highlights of your career and the good things. But I let some of this negativity, getting stabbed in the back of my own department, affect me personally, and to the point where I had hate in my heart towards some of these people because I didn't want to see them. Some sergeants, some lieutenants, some commanders. I could work circles around them. I mean, they wore the same uniform I did, but they weren't a cop. And I knew that, and they knew that. And so that part was frustrating. It wasn't until later in my career where I had heard a message. A pastor was preaching about bitterness, and he said, if you have bitterness in your heart towards somebody, it's like you drinking the poison and waiting for them to die.
Yeah.
Was that Pastor Tillotson?
It was.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember
message.
that sermon. I still
The
remember it.
skiing one, right, where he broke his arm or broke his wrist.
I went out to the parking lot of our church after he got done saying that, and I basically broke down in the parking lot, crying out to God and saying, "That's me. That's what I'm doing." And I'm trying to do the right thing. I'm trying to work hard. I'm trying to work hard for my victims. I'm trying to catch bad guys, and I'm getting all this grief, and I can't stand these people, and you start to think that you're better than them. And God just said, no, you're not better than them. And this is where I have you. And so you're going to have to change because they're not changing. They don't even think of this. This doesn't even affect their life. Wow. They did wrong by you. Guys at the police department know it. Baldwin, you should sue this agency. You should do this. You should do that. I would always hope that God would fix something and make it right, and he chose not to. So those were some of the lessons that I had to learn.
It's hard because, the scripture says it. God's not going to take away the trial. He just promises he'll be there through the trial. Right?
And then he also says, right, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. And I think on this earth, we expect retribution, or we expect him to settle it. And I think at the very end, when he comes again, all things will be settled. He'll take care of all debts. And that works in our favor too. But when it's against us, I want that guy taken care of it. But when it's, when we're the ones that are, are the offender, we don't want that same type of justice.
Yeah. When you're going through it, it's tough,
And that was a great message. That's one of the top, I still remember his examples he gave. And
yeah, I sent him an email and told him thank you and told him how that worked in my life. And he responded a week or so later saying, he was glad that God used him to say those things.
I got to hear him this last week on the senior trip, and it was just another amazing message that he gave. And
he's just very practical. Yeah. He's very relatable and practical in his preaching. And
he laughs. He has a good time preaching.
He has a funny laugh too. I love his laugh. I love his laugh.
You got to love that.
He's very approachable too. And so he's president of Faith Baptist Bible and
Faith Baptist Bible College.
College. There you go.
Yep.
And that's actually
it's not capitalized, which is weird to me, but yeah, nevertheless, great school.
Great school. Yep. So, how did you deal with unbelieving coworkers? I know you'd mentioned, you weren't out drinking with the boys, you weren't out partying, you weren't doing the stuff that they were doing. Obviously language, there's probably jokes, locker room talk. How'd you deal with all that?
Yeah, that was, I knew there was going to be a lot of cursing, and I knew people, didn't believe necessarily the way I did. And so I sometimes put it off to the side and just put my head down and focus on my work. I hated it when guys would use God's name in vain. I'd rather him use the F word.
Right.
And I hate to say that too, but I really would. But they don't know God.
Right.
And they don't even, it's like the thief on the cross. He was a sinner, and then a minute later, when he died, he was in heaven because God forgave him.
Amen.
And
that's right.
Jesus even said to the crowd, "These people don't know what they're doing," and I serve the Lord. If you're not a believer, you know, you're not serving him, you don't know him, you just are repeating what you've heard your whole life. And but I didn't try to ever get in an argument with guys about spiritual things. I enjoy talking to guys one-on-one. So I wouldn't say things in front of a group of 20 or 30. But one-on-one, a guy in my car, somebody that I'm training, I'd find out, you know, where his heart is. And I'd talk about spiritual things. I'd talk about church and what I'm going to do this weekend and with my family and how long I've been married, and just kind of lay the groundwork down. And some of these guys were very respectful around me, and while I was training them, you know, they kind of respected the parameters that I had set. So that's good. And
just attending your retirement ceremony, I think that was a great testimony that they said, I forgot what word they said you used, but it was, I don't know what it even was, like, dang it, or I don't even know if it was that, but just like they had never heard you say a bad word, which is a testament in the work environment and that kind of, when you're giving commands to somebody, right? Sometimes.
Yeah, because sometimes the only thing is somebody who's mentally ill or on the street using drugs understand, you know, please, sir, please put down the weapon. Or the police, we're here to help you. But if somebody says, you know, drop the weapon, they will, because they understand that language.
Right. Yeah,
but just a testament that they said that about you. So that was a good testimony.
It's got to be difficult though. I mean, because you're in it. You know, you spend more time with these guys than you do at home with your wife, and so it's. I can attest to it too, because I was in a secular job, and the guys would talk the same, you know, and I, like you said, you expect that from a non-believer, but at the same time, you kind of want to at least have a work relationship, because you've got to see these people every day for so much time.
Yes.
So it's just difficult. It's difficult. I know there's days where I come home and I'm just like, man, you just feel like you just took a beating, just because everything comes at you. I mean, there's temptations, there's talk, there's language. I mean, all of that stuff just comes at you all day long. It's like a spiritual warfare. It really is. It's spiritual warfare.
Absolutely.
You know? But
engagement of the enemy.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, we've talked about politics and coworkers, and I'm sure as a police officer, you've come on some scenes and probably seen things that you had hoped you'd never see, or you know, things that you'd probably see in a horror film or something like that. I mean, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so I mean, you truly see evil at times, and there were some scenes, certainly working violent crimes, where you go to just a bloody suicide, certainly a homicide. There's, you know, what can be worse than that, taking someone's life?
Yeah.
Some very violent type assaults and things of that nature, and you see the evil, but you have a job to do. And so I took an oath at the police academy when I was sworn in on graduation night that I would do the best that I can. And so I kind of treat those scenes clinically, you know, walk over the blood and sometimes guts, and, you know, not to gross the listeners out, but there's some things that I'm so grateful that my kids have not seen. You want to talk about something nasty, just going into a heroin house, and you know, you're walking around and you're seeing feces on the floor, needles everywhere, and you got to search that house because you have a search warrant and you're looking for this or that, and it's some nasty stuff. But I knew I was doing a job, and so it's like maybe a doctor sometimes, you know, he sees something gross, but he's trained to do this. Right, he does it clinically, does his job, and then maybe you decompress afterwards. There were some times where I came home and my wife, Tracy, knew that I had been on a bad scene because I left my clothes in the garage. I didn't even bring them inside the house because it's, you know, that's how nasty this place was. So, and then police officers, we have, you know, weird humor sometimes to kind of get through things, and you say things, and you're kind of joking, but it's kind of getting you through the stress. Now, with everybody wearing cameras, it sounds bad, you were joking, with that dead body and someone who blew their head off or whatever it was. But it's coping mechanism sometimes to get through it.
And in that situation, as far as how did you separate that piece before you came home, or did you sometimes feel like you brought that to?
Yeah, so some guys, well, I never took work home, and okay, well, that wasn't me. I did take it home sometimes. A lot of times with that 30-minute ride home, I was able to decompress and relax a little bit. But there were times where, you can't stop thinking about what you just saw, and your spouse will ask you, "Hey, where were you? What kind of call were you on?" You're like, "You don't want to know." "Yeah, I do want to know." "No, you don't." And sometimes after a couple "no, you don'ts," then she knew that must have been pretty bad. And I'll talk about it when I want to talk about it. But I didn't hide that stuff by, drinking alcohol and trying to numb it. And some guys do that and get in trouble. I did have the Lord with me, and I think he helped me. And the Bible says, think on good things. Bad things, some of the things that I saw pop into your head, but I try not to dwell on it. And people that dwell on it, those are the guys that develop, post-traumatic stress, and it's like they're constantly thinking about it. And I don't forget it, but I don't dwell on it. And then I go to church too. I have an outlet where I'm around good people, sinners, but good people. And they love the Lord, and I feel safe around them. So that was a good outlet for me.
You talked about coping mechanism, and I think we all have some of those to an extent. I mean, we may not all be, into drugs and alcohol or pornography or whatever, but I think some of us, sometimes we have
Social media.
Yeah, social media. You binge watch a television show. Yeah, I talked about this at FTL actually. One of mine is the refrigerator. I get some stress sometimes, and I'll find myself at the refrigerator, or
it's comfortable.
Or sometimes I'll start digging into Twitter, and I'm just there and I need to stop, because I saw something in the news, and I'm just like, well, okay, what's going on? I start getting stressed out. Did you ever deal with a coping mechanism, so to speak? I mean, because you saw some horrendous. I can't imagine what you saw. My stresses are probably, in comparison to your stresses, not even comparable.
Yeah, when I look back at it, I remember one night I was called out. I was on call, and I got called out 3 times from the time I got home. As soon as I got home, I got called out for a dead body. Got done clearing that up, came back home, just got into bed, got called out again for another dead body. I got called out 3 times that shift for a dead body or suicide. It's like, man, wow. It starts to wear on you. You see it, you become jaded and numb to it, and your family probably says, "Hey, you're not as funny as you used to be." And yeah, I've seen some serious things. Life's not a joke. Yeah, and I've seen what evil can do. Yeah, and then as a parent, sometimes you want to not cover for your kids, but you want to protect them. And oh, come on, you're overreacting. No, if you saw some of the things that I saw, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. There were a few nights, I think I was out with the devil incarnate. Somebody's acting so crazy out of their mind, holding a gun or a knife in their hand. I've seen a guy holding the baby hostage and stuff, and I'm pulling out the slack on my trigger, gonna shoot this guy, and at the last second he complies, and that takes a toll.
Can't imagine.
So you would see the spiritual warfare live in action, as far as actually living in people.
So I truly, so I can see that in Ephesians, where it says, "Put on the whole armor of God." I can see that there is a spiritual battle. I lived it, and if you don't believe, and if the listeners don't believe that there's a battle going on between the forces of good and evil, then you're not paying attention, and you're naive. If you haven't seen what's happened in our country, some of the evils that are called good and some of the good that's called evil, that is It's demonic.
Well, and I think a lot of people get, they watch these TV shows and they get calloused, and they're just like, oh well, it's.
It becomes a form of entertainment.
Yeah.
I think in a lot of ways.
So violence is kind of nothing to them anymore, and it's like you start thinking, well, it's not that bad, and it's like, man, like you're watching a murder, like that's murder, that's horrible, that's terrible.
Yeah, it's all these action movies. I mean, we enjoy watching them because they're usually high production and stuff like that. But in the first 30 minutes of the movie, 28 people got killed, and by this superhero, or somebody did something to his family, and now he's exacting revenge, and we actually are happy for him because
the Avengers.
because
there you go.
Because he's exacting this revenge on people who deserve it, and we applaud that violence. And but to see it in real life and smell it and hear people's agony behind it, somebody yelling or screaming whose family member was just killed or murdered, killed and murdered, I guess is the same thing, but it's bad.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you have another aspect of Christians that don't want to admit that there is like demonic forces that are out. But it's very real, and even the Bible talks about it. How they could see the spiritual world, and there is a spiritual world that exists around us that we just can't even see. God sees, of course.
Well, talking about drugs and all of that, I honestly think when you're altering your mind with drugs or alcohol, any format of that sort, you're opening, I think, yourself spiritually to the demonic, honestly. Like, I think.
Well, there's a person that comes to Freedom the last. I won't say his name, but he says that he's opened the door to a lot of things in his life because of drugs.
Yeah. They call it a gateway, and it's a gateway because you're not thinking clearly.
Yeah.
And he's a believer, but he said he's opened doors in his life because of his addiction.
I believe it. I believe it.
You want to take another commercial break?
Yeah, let's go and take a quick break, and we'll continue the conversation.
Hello, this is Kevin Shull. Are you or someone you know dealing with the agony of an addiction? You cannot change what you do until you let God change who you are. Freedom That Lasts is a discipleship ministry of Northwest Valley Baptist Church that applies the life-transforming principles of the gospel and Christian growth to the problems of life-dominating sins and addictions. All of this happens in an atmosphere of love and accountability. If you would like to know more information about this important ministry, give us a call at 623-581-3115.
And we're back. And so can you tell us, what was, I know we've talked about, all of these different things, even just the crazy things that you see on the streets, but what would you say the most difficult situation you've dealt with at the workplace, whatever it may be, and how did you get through that?
So it's a personal story. It's not something that was out on the road per se, but I was a sergeant at the time. I enjoyed being a sergeant. I loved my squad, the men and women who worked for me. When you're a sergeant, the next thing in line, you're going to do a good job there, and you're going to promote to lieutenant, and you're going to make more money and move up the chain. And so that's the career path I was going. We had a gang member just recently released from prison, and he had been committing some violent crimes in the city, a couple drive-by shootings. So we were looking for him. His name was on the radar. He had done alleged kidnapping, where he took someone's child. Might have been a custody issue, but it was by force. And then there was another hit-and-run accident where he had held a knife to someone's throat, threatening them. So we're looking for this guy, and I am talking to my street contacts. I enjoy talking to gang members on the street, and that's how you got good information. You treat them well, they give you information.
Yeah.
And they were telling me, hey, Baldwin, this guy's going to kill somebody. You better get him. Well, where's he at? I'm not a snitch. I'm not telling. And so the hunt was on, and, the go-getters were looking for this guy, and the lazy people weren't. And long story short, one of my guys arrested somebody, and they had information as to where this guy was at. And so they contacted me as a sergeant and said, hey, this guy wants to talk to you, give up some information. So I vetted this individual and got some information. Some people would call it a source of information. I knew he knew the bad guy that I was looking for and was friends with him and might be able to give him up. And that didn't work out the way that I had planned. And I thought I'm doing a good thing. I'm going after, the bigger fish, the bigger bad guy, letting this guy go with some information. And somehow, some way, somebody made a complaint, and they brought me in. They were talking to me about it. And who gave you authorization to make this deal? And I said, well, I'm a sergeant. You did. You put stripes on my arm, and they didn't like that. And next thing you know, I'm omitting some parts of the story just for time, but my intentions were right. I'm getting a violent felon off the street, somebody that's going to kill somebody, and I'm going through an internal affairs investigation. And anyway, so they moved me off my squad, and that was embarrassing because I'm, under investigation, and they're out still looking for this guy. Well, the next week he carjacked someone in Glendale, and there's a pursuit. U.S. Marshals are involved, and he gets away. Wow. And I said, I told you he's a bad guy. He's getting worse and worse. He's going to kill somebody. Well, then on my new squad, I was talking to some more people on the street, and they gave me enough information where I could find him, and I got him cornered in a house. I contacted the lieutenant, and I told her, ma'am, I have the house surrounded. I have this guy inside the house. It's time to call the SWAT team because he's not going to go willingly. And she told me to go 10-8, which means go back in service. She said, I don't want you talking to any street contacts anymore, and I don't want, you guys being undercover on the street or anything like that. I couldn't believe what she said, and I drove to the police department, talked to her face-to-face in her office, and I said, ma'am, he's going to kill somebody. And she's like, I gave you an order. And so 8 days later, he did do a drive-by and killed a grandmother and proved me right. But the investigation was still ongoing. And long story short, I got demoted from my position. And so you're like, I tell that story to anybody and they can't believe it. How did that happen? You were doing the right thing. Well, I wasn't doing the right thing according to the powers that be and the letter of the law of our policy. I was acting in the spirit of the law, but not the letter of the law according to our policies at the police department. So that was a hard pill to swallow, and that was embarrassing. It was wrong. And so I had prayed to the Lord, hey, God, can you fix this? I'd love to see you make this right. It was years later in court. I got deposed on that situation. The family, somehow, I don't know, it wasn't me, who learned that I had this house surrounded. I'd called for a SWAT team and I was denied. And so they wanted to sue the department. And I was put in the awkward position of representing
the police department,
the family.
Oh, the family
against the police department.
Oh, wow.
And I had never met this family, and I saw them in court for the first time. And judges or the prosecutors, are asking me questions. Detective, did this happen? This happened? This happened? Yes. And he awarded the family that they could continue with this lawsuit. So they settled with the city for some undisclosed amount, and I'm still demoted. But when I was demoted, I became a detective. And maybe that's where God wanted me to be, because I became a very good detective. I trained a lot of people. But when you asked me the question, what was the hardest thing for me? It was getting stabbed in the back at my own police department for doing the right thing. And it was proven later on in court, that a judge said, hey, he was doing the right thing. And still nobody would take action to reinstate me.
No apologies.
Oh, no. A couple of chiefs later took place, and so they're like, well, that happened under someone else's watch. There's nothing I can do. I'm like, you're the chief of police. You can do what you want.
Right.
But it wasn't in the cards. And so that was a very difficult thing in my life. And that took a lot of years to get over. And so I'm over it, but I don't forget it. It's a scar. It happened. But sometimes you have scars and you don't forget what happened, but it's a reminder, of what happened.
Yeah.
And, there's a song that talks about I'm thankful for the scars, and it's talking about Jesus' scars. And yeah, those are proof of what happened, when he died for us and his love for us. So you don't forget that, but a scar tells a story.
Yeah.
I think that's what he said in that same exact message, right? Is it a scar or does it still hurt? And that's when you know
Right.
where you're at on the bitterness scale.
Oh, right.
Is it a scar or is it
an open wound?
Is it an open wound?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So what, I mean, you've had I think you've had multiple positions, right? In police, you've done detective, sergeant. You've done SWAT also.
Yes, I was on SWAT. I went to SWAT school at Mesa and enjoyed that. I was on our team for 8 years, and I was point man, which is the first person through the door, and everything back then was dynamic entry. So you knock and announce, you throw in a flashbang after you blow, you breach the door, and it creates a diversion, and then the team goes in. Well, you're in the fatal funnel. The bad guy knows where you're at. You got to come through the front door or the back door. Nowadays, they do things different. They surround and call out. They breach. They break and rake all the windows. They announce real loud. The house is surrounded. They port the windows with guns. You can almost clear the house from the outside. Then we have drones that can go in, robots, dogs, gas,
Crazy.
a number of things. So they rarely do any dynamic entry on SWAT anymore.
Wow. So, I mean, obviously, being in all these different positions, you've probably been in life or death situations. Can you kind of elaborate on that? And I mean, what was it like? And obviously, you're secure in Christ. I mean, something horrible happens. I mean, your destiny, your eternal destiny. But like, what was that like? I mean, there's still a little fear, I mean, your nerves. I mean, it's
Butterflies in there.
I can't imagine, man.
Yes.
You get that before a basketball game. I can't imagine this is life or death.
So there have been times in my career where I was faced with someone with a gun or a knife, and I'm pulling the slack out of the trigger, and they comply at the last minute, and that's huge. I had to clear a house one time for a guy who didn't show up for work, and they said, "Hey, he's suicidal. He talked about buying a gun the day before," and so I knock on the door, no answer. The sergeant at the time asked me, "What should we do?" Now I think they would just leave. But back then we didn't leave. I'm like, we need to go in and do a welfare check. And so we breached the front door, and now you're just slowly, methodically going through this house. And in the kitchen, I see a bunch of beer cans, and I'm like, oh, he's been drinking. People that are drinking aren't thinking clearly.
Right.
Then I see a rifle on the counter with bullets all over the ground and on the counter, and no body. So we start heading down the hall. The sergeant's behind me. I'm in front. And clear one room, not there. Clear another room, not there. We get to the garage. I open that. His car's in the garage. I'm like, oh, shoot, he's here. The last room to check is the master bedroom. And so, your heart is pumping out of your chest. If it's going to be right now. And you're slowly pieing around the corner with your handgun. You get into the room, and it's clear. You check the bathroom, it's clear. And the last little room is the closet. Open the closet, and he's hanging from the rafters in his closet. He was still alive, and I cut him down, and we worked him, and he lived. But that was a very scary situation.
Yeah.
And it's almost a story that you forget, because that was one day, and then after that I went out and answered more calls for service. One night on a late swing shift, early graveyard shift, I was almost about to be relieved and go home. Emergency tone kicks out, hot tone. I live for the hot tone. Boop, emergency traffic, gunshot, blah, 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 at this location. Lady saying her husband's just been shot. Suspects are in a such and such car going unknown direction. And I pictured in my head where this call was at. I'm like, the only ways out of the city are going to be Dysart Road and Loop 303 going south or north. I'm close to Dysart and Bell right now, so I just started sliding down Dysart in my patrol car, heading south as fast as I can, thinking of the only roads that would take you further east in Olivewood. So I went to Olive. Just as I get to Olive, this car just flies over the intersection, and I got the car. And so I start to give chase, and they're like, okay, can you give us a plate? I'm like, no. They're flying so fast. I got up to speeds of 105 miles an hour.
Wow.
And chasing them and starting to give direction of travel, speed, road conditions, things of that nature. But it was a perfect storm. They had just shot someone. They were in a stolen car, I later learned. The gun. They had 3 guns in the car. So the sergeant allowed the pursuit to continue, and I chased them for 15 miles, going through Phoenix a little bit, and till they crashed. And then when they crashed, I jumped out. Other units started to get there. That was the first time any units had caught up. That's how fast we were going in this pursuit. And we took 5 people into custody. And had they not crashed, it would have been a shootout. There was methamphetamine in the car. There was 3 guns. They're gang members.
Wow.
But I was in my element. I knew I enjoyed that, and I wasn't scared. I wasn't being cocky or anything, but I had a job to do. People are, were you scared to do that? And I wasn't. Because, talk about guardian angels, I truly believe in them. I mean, during this pursuit, we were going through a construction zone where there was things on both sides for about 1.5 miles. They had blacked out, turned their headlights out in front of me. And I said, the car blacked out. I might lose them. And ultimately they crashed. And so that was it was a life and death situation. Wow. When you look back at it and think about it.
Are you throwing up prayers at any given time? I mean, just Lord help me. Nothing elaborate, obviously.
I have done that. I don't think I was doing it that night, but I've whispered a prayer heading up to some unknown trouble, because that's a call where your police officer is the most scary.
Yeah.
When they say emergency traffic, unknown trouble, we're hearing people yelling, we're hearing gunshots going off, blah, blah, blah. You don't even know what you're getting into.
Right.
Okay, Lord, help me. And then, you're the first one on scene. Again, now police tactics change.
Yeah.
They're going to wait and get several officers there. But back then, you handled things. So
You just do what you got to do.
So with the bad things, what would you say is the most rewarding thing you can reflect back on that was man, that made me proud to be, or there was some fruit there that came out of your police work?
Yeah, so they weren't always huge things, but there's a story of this little boy walking on the beach, and all these starfish are up on the beach, and he's picking them up and he's throwing them back in. And some old guy walks by him and says, you'll never save them all. And then he threw another one in and he said, well, it mattered to that one.
Yeah.
At one point in my career, I tried to save them all, and I couldn't save them all. But to say that I did something and it mattered to that person.
Yeah.
One was a lady whose husband called me and said, hey, can you come by the house? And I hadn't got a call from him in several months. And she was a drug addict. I chased her all over the place. She hated me. She cussed me out, spit at me. She went to prison. And so I didn't know what I was getting into. And, he's like, my wife wants to talk to you. And she's like, Detective Baldwin, thank you for being a jerk. And thank you for hounding me and sending me to prison, because, that's what it took to get clean. And so you're like, wow, you didn't expect that, but it made a difference to that one.
Yeah.
There were elderly women, maybe whose husband was going through cancer or something, committed suicide, and I helped them. And I went to their house and I treated them kindly, and it wasn't my job to do, but I got down on my hands and knees and cleaned up the brains and the blood matter and stuff like that so they wouldn't have to. And, it mattered to that person. My retirement ceremony was very meaningful. Saso went to it, and I didn't have any command staff speak. I just had some guys that I had trained, guys that I had worked with that were partners of mine over the years. And I just asked them to speak at graduation, didn't tell them what to say. And the Lord gave me a blessing, a treat that day, because my family was there and they had heard all the negative things, over the years. And I'm getting a little emotional, but these officers, these detectives, some are supervisors now, they talked about my work ethic, and they talked about my work as a detective, and that they learned a lot from me. And then they talked about my testimony, and that I was a believer and a Christian man, and that they learned a lot from me. And so that was huge, because you're like, it mattered to that one. And so that was the most rewarding.
Amen.
Yeah, when you get to hear that confirmation, it's like the Lord saying, yeah, well done, good and faithful servant. I mean, it's almost to that effect.
Well, it's almost to the point where you're like, okay, that's what I was here for. That's why I got demoted, because he didn't want me there, because I needed to make a difference to this one. And, I mean, the Bible says that all things work together for good. It does not say that all things are good. That was not good. Some of the things that happened, some of the things that I experienced. But God somehow, in his way, has a way of making things work out for good. And so,
work out for good to those who love him.
that is the verse. To those who love him,
Yeah.
to those who are called according to his purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I am called according to his purpose, and I do love him.
Amen.
And I think a job is a calling, right? Whatever God gives you to do. It could be a police officer or whatever, but beginning of time, he said man's going to work by the sweat of his brow, but he gives man a job. And we look at a job like, do we move up in it? But he gives us a job to be part of the community, to serve the community, and also to be a witness and a testimony to others. And I think there was people there at your ceremony that I don't even know they believed in God per se, but they saw God in you. And I think everybody that went up there said that about you. They talked about your work ethic, but it's kind of a threefold work ethic, how he trained me, and then how I didn't even hear him say a bad word in all the times I've been with him. And we've been in some, and they gave you some funny stories too about the donuts and things like that.
Sure.
And the gate. But that's where you really, I think when you work in any job you have, the people that work with you side by side or day by day, and what they say about you is a testament to who you really are, because they know you on a different level than a manager, supervisor. These are people that respect you on a different level.
That goes back to the verse that you started this thing with, do things heartily as to the Lord. I saw something one time on someone's wall in their cubicle, and it was things that are under my control. And it was my attitude, my work ethic, and the level of my work and my performance, and ultimately, who do I work for?
Right.
And so I told people I didn't work for the chief of police. I worked for God and
Amen.
the citizens that I swore to protect. So that's who I work for.
As we go back to this verse in Colossians, just setting it, and Paul was talking to the people of Colossae. They were slaves, and so he was telling them, like, hey, you don't work for a slave owner. They were giving meaningless tasks. He said, you work for God. And just to give that verse context, and that's what Paul was telling them. And I think a lot of jobs we feel, mundane task or whatever, that we're not appreciated. But he said, we work to the Lord. And that's what Paul was telling these people at this church. And they were slaves. And he said, don't think of it as you're a slave, but you're working for God. And I think that's a great mindset to have, because that's truly who we work for. And he will give us a reward.
It's a good reminder.
It's just like the story of Joseph. I mean, if you want to talk about somebody who got some crazy trials, and doing the right thing, getting in trouble, and I mean, that was Joseph. And at the very end, I mean, God put him in a specific place, just like you said. He put him in a particular position where he was able to save his family and
save the nation
and the nation,
of Israel, and
his
the Egyptians too.
Yeah.
Second in command.
Right. So, you got to trust God, and that's sometimes not easy because we don't know what's coming, and sometimes you got to deal with humility and other things along the way, and keeping your testimony. And I can't imagine how difficult it is to keep your testimony in the stressful type work that you did. I mean, because it's stressful on many levels, not just working out on the streets, but dealing with the politics.
Especially when they make it harder for you, and then it has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it wasn't perfect. I mean, everybody knows that, but it's like as a whole, I tried to maintain a good testimony. The Lord helped me a lot of times, and when you fail, you confess that sin and try to rebound and be resilient, come back better.
So I know oftentimes, we go through trials or tough times, and there's verses that we kind of cling to. So I'm just curious, did you have any verses that those were your go-to verses when things got tough?
Yeah, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean in not on your understanding, but on His. And He's going to direct your paths. And there's a lot of times, Lord, I don't know what to do on this case. I need wisdom. I'm trusting You to help me here. Sometimes as simple as turning left or right. I'm looking on a attempt to locate for the bad guy. Got 2 streets. Okay, Lord, help me. Let's go left. And a lot of times we found the guy, and people are like, "Dude, how did you do that?" Like, left or right? I picked one, but I think
Proverbs 3:5.
I think the Lord helped me. And then people talk about, were you scared? Are you afraid out there? And Bible verse in Psalm 56, 3 and 4. What time I am afraid, I will trust in Thee. In God, I will praise His word. In God, I put my trust. You have to believe in that. I have to believe that God's going to protect me. He put me in this position.
Right.
I do believe in guardian angels. And then this was quoted a lot in the police department. Even some of the unsaved guys would quote part of the verse, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Well, for me, that was the truth. There were times I'm walking into an unknown, late at night, dark. It's not all, there's compounds, way out west where people are cooking meth and doing things. You're like, okay, dogs, pit bulls. Typically, I'm scared of that type of dog, but I remember, beware of dog will bite, owner will shoot, and opening that gate and walking through and going, okay, here it goes. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, because Thou art with me.
Amen. 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 It's been a pretty intense episode, I think.
A little bit, yeah. Entertaining.
What would you, and obviously not everybody has a job like that. There's people that work in different, office settings and, blue collar work, whatever it may be. But what would you say to someone dealing with trials in the workplace? I know, Saso, you've dealt with this, when you were at Target. I know you had kind of a crazy boss.
Yeah.
But what would you say to somebody dealing with those trials? What would you tell them?
I know the sun's coming up in the morning, so tough times don't last forever, but tough people do. And this is something we say now in my current job with my new boss is stay in the fight. Don't quit. Don't quit now. And so that's what I would tell them.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you for
it's been a blessing
blessing us on this episode. It was a pleasure to hear your work testimony. Like I mentioned earlier, I know you've got a even deeper story going back to childhood, but
we can get into that later.
Maybe
Spirit of adoption.
Maybe another episode. Yeah,
adoption part 2.
But
Anything you'd like to shout out? Anybody you'd like to recognize or shout out on the podcast before we close?
Oh, I'm proud of my children, Braden and Macy. They're both working on getting their master's degree.
Awesome.
Braden is in charge of his own little company called Baldwin Performance, and he's doing real well down in Florida. And then Macy just got through with her first couple grades in her master's program and got A's, and we're ecstatic about that.
That's awesome.
And she is now not following in her dad's footsteps, but she's coaching.
Nice.
Middle school track and field and elementary girls basketball. So I'm proud of her.
That's awesome.
Proud
man.
of both of them.
And I always say Mike was the best coach I never got to play for. So I practiced with Mike for several practices, but I got kicked out of school prior to ever playing for Mike. So good times. You're going to let this guy with a 36-inch waist beat you?
Wow. Wow.
He's out hustling you.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us on this podcast episode. Be sure to visit us at abundantlife.fm. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And we will see you in the next episode.
Yep. Thank you for joining us.
Bye for now.
All right, guys.